I had a crippling anxiety disorder. It took me until my early 20s to understand exactly what it was. And not knowing what was wrong was the toughest thing for me. The moment I knew exactly what anxiety was, how I could control it, little things like breathing exercises and so many different life upgrades, that is what took me from someone who was a victim of my life for the first 23 years into someone who was saying, you know what? Life can throw anything at me. I'm going to spend the rest of my days being as strong and capable as I possibly can.
Welcome to Successful with ADHD. I'm Brooke Schnittman. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Today we have James Whittaker on the Successful with ADHD podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you, James, on the podcast.
Brooke, thank you so much for having me. I just enjoy seeing your face first thing in the morning. So thank you very much for having me here.
I love when people say that on the West Coast, right? I'm like, no, it's not the morning. You're nice and giddy. You had your coffee. You had whatever else you needed in the morning to biohack your day. And it's midday here on the East Coast.
Yeah, you're already tired from the day. Hey, I had to get my daily routine ready for my 2 young kids this morning. I'm also on solo parenting duty this week while my wife is out your way. She's in Florida on a big work trip. So it's been a bit of a hectic morning in the Whittaker household today.
Okay. Well, today we have James Whittaker, who helps 2 million people each month to win the day. And he personally has coached Olympic gold medalists, billion-dollar CEOs, not million, but billion, and special forces operators. His superpower is helping ambitious but frustrated people gain immediate clarity on what they want and give them a bulletproof plan to achieve it. James is also a 3 times bestselling author. He's a Success magazine speaker and executive producer of the multi-million-dollar Think and Grow Rich film. How cool. So some of you might have read Think and Grow Rich. He wrote Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy. Is that correct?
That's right. I also wrote a follow-up book called Andrew Carnegie's Mental Dynamite, co-authored with Napoleon Hill and released with the Napoleon Hill Foundation.
Oh, no big deal. So today we are here to talk about James' suspected ADHD. With that, he'll also be sharing some of his tools and tips to help people like us and like himself to win the day and be successful with ADHD. So James, tell us about your journey. I know you are self-diagnosed. So when was that aha moment that you figured, okay, I think I might have it?
Well, there are moments of comparison that I think are really interesting. So I had an older brother who performed very well academically, and we're just very different people. We have an amazing relationship, but to see how well he could apply himself to study and how well he was able to grasp concepts that were taught to him. And I was very different. I didn't want to be in the classroom. I had a difficult time concentrating, and my brain was always racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And when you have that natural comparison and you're in an environment like high school where they tell you that the exam that you're studying for is going to determine the rest of your life, it's a very difficult position to be in. So the things that I really struggled with at that age in particular that were diagnosed are things like anxiety. I had a crippling anxiety disorder. It took me until my early 20s to understand exactly what it was. And the fact that I didn't, we can talk a little bit about labels a bit later on, but not knowing what was wrong was the toughest thing for me. The moment I knew exactly what anxiety was, how I could control it, little things like breathing exercises and so many different life upgrades, that is what took me from someone who was a victim of my life for the first 23 years into someone who was saying, you know what? Life can throw anything at me. I'm going to spend the rest of my days being as strong and capable as I possibly can.
Wow. Okay. So that's amazing. You've rewired your brain and you gave us a little tip about breathing, a little big tip about breathing. And I'm sure you have plenty of other tips to come. But crippling anxiety, it's amazing that when people don't know they have ADHD and they don't have the symptoms managed, that's where the anxiety really comes in. And some therapists out there actually don't believe in generalized anxiety disorders and generalized anxiety disorders for individuals with ADHD. Find it interesting. So I also have anxiety and was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder before I had the ADHD diagnosis. So Was it the ADHD diagnosis or awareness that helped you overcome some of the anxiety symptoms?
You know what it was for me? It was taking a very brutal and honest assessment of absolutely everything that I was doing in my life. Eating crappy processed food, drinking too much alcohol and sugary drinks, smoking cigarettes, hanging around deadbeats, all of these different things, not reading.
Well, I'm glad you're not hanging around deadbeats now because I
Well,
wouldn't
it's
be in that that circle, right?
for sure, for sure. And you know what? Relationships are the key. Like you really are. If you're looking around the 4 or 5 or 6 people you spend the most time with, they are your future. And if that
Absolutely.
scares you, then get the hell out of there. So it was for me focusing on all of those different things. And I didn't really understand all of that. And the moment that I started reading books, so I wanted to find everything I could. I wanted to study everything I could about peak performance, relationships, resilience, mental health, physical health, fitness, nutrition, everything. And that's what I have been doing now for about 17 years. So that was a very, very big difference. How can you expect to have a good relationship within if you haven't got the foundations set? That's like that. So much of it, we can talk about like advanced, complex strategies, but for people who don't have the basics dialed in, like even things like your living environment and your working environment, like are they full of clutter or do you make sure that they're organized so they're not distracting you? Making sure that you
Right.
don't have things
That
like
physical chaos.
yeah, absolutely. Even like to the extent that I don't like seeing alcohol or junk food or sugary drinks. I don't like seeing that stuff anywhere. Like I want to be so focused on that peak performance and things that are going to bring out my best. And I know that sounds like a lot of effort and almost too much of a focus, but I have very big goals and very big responsibilities. And I want to make sure my entire ecosystem is set up for me to win because there are a lot of people who depend on me and who have given me
Yeah.
this opportunity.
What was your motivation? Did you just get around the right people? Were you lucky, or did something happen in your life that gave you that motivation to optimize your peak performance?
Yeah, and of course it wasn't like a straight it wasn't like a straight line on the way up. It was a bit like a stock market graph of sort of going up and down, but always
Sure.
trending in the right direction the moment I made that big decision. A huge turning point for me was at the age of 28 when I moved from Brisbane, Australia to do an MBA in Boston. So as far away from Brisbane as you could possibly get, going to Boston, Massachusetts, that was a huge change.
Did you get a day back when you flew?
Yes, and then
You had two
you was
days?
I think when you land before the plane's even taken off. But then when you get back to Australia, I think it is
You miss
you
a
arrive
day,
like two
right?
days later. Yeah, yeah, it's really weird. And that program was 9 months Boston, 3 months Shanghai and China. So I was completely out of my comfort zone. I didn't know anyone. And what I started to see in the entrepreneurial world that I just never been exposed to was seeing people my age and younger who were starting businesses, they were pitching investors, they were raising money. And that was when I thought to myself, if these people are doing it, then I can do it too. That was a huge moment of possibilities for me and self belief. So that was definitely one of the biggest shifts in terms of that inner work that led to a lot of the projects that you mentioned earlier that I've been involved in since then.
Hmm. So, what made you decide to go from Brisbane to Boston?
I just had this. A lot of people from Australia go to the UK. You know, UK's got pretty crappy weather. Food's not great. I don't really have a huge, no offense to everyone who lives in who lives in the UK. I've always identified more with like the American culture, and America's just a cool place to be. People come here, particularly to LA where I live. People come here to follow their dreams, and that's a really motivating environment to be in. And where I grew up in Australia, there's typically just a few industries that people go into, like financial services, government, mining, that type of thing. So once I came over here, I then met my now wife after being here for a year, and now we have 2 children. And the opportunities for the work that I do and the relationships that I have with organizations like the Napoleon Hill Foundation and Success Magazine, I'm very comfortable here, and I've got a very clear roadmap of the things that need to be achieved. And this is the place to be. Maybe Australia long term, possibly.
I love Australia too, by the way. I studied abroad there for 5 months in Sydney and went to Brisbane, went to Melbourne, went to Fiji, went to
Nice.
New Zealand. It's beautiful. People are so nice there. So you've obviously had a lot of success, and we're going to talk about those success tips. But I really want people to get a picture of what life was like for you when you were in toxic relationships, you were smoking. Like how all of a sudden did you just stop? I know you said it's not linear and it
Yeah.
was like a stock market graph, but like what got you to get motivated for that?
Yeah, great question. There are some moments in life where, for whatever reason, you just wake up with the feeling of saying, I just don't want to do this anymore. But the biggest turning point that I mentioned when I was 23, I was working at a liquor store at the time, just a part time job. And they said to me that you're going to open the store alone for the first time. And for anyone else, that'd be like, cool, I get to work and hang out by myself. For me, that was the ultimate situation of anxiety, being in a situation that you couldn't escape from. And of course, when you're in there, you have all these moments of like, what happens if I have like this anxiety attack? And the way that manifested for me is that I would either faint or throw up or both. And if you're doing that, someone can come in and rob the store and any number of things can happen. And it was a 22-minute window. It always happened basically at 22 minutes. And it's so funny, all the work now that I do with Think and Grow Rich, just as we can think and grow rich, we can think and grow poor. And that's what I was doing. I was
Mhm.
willing these circumstances without me consciously even being aware of it. And sure enough, that happened. And the only person that I trusted to speak with about this, I mean, this is a Sunday morning. I was so nervous the night before. I was in bed early. I tried to do all of these different things. I fainted, I threw up, and I was so sick. And it was such a horrible moment in my life. It still gives me chills talking about it. I actually called my mum. She was the only person I trusted with this. And she came down and sat with me, and it was just such an embarrassing thing to even think about. And then we came home, and I was absolutely inconsolable. So someone came in and relieved my shift. Of course, that person had no idea what I was going through. They thought that I was perhaps hungover from the night before or something like that. That was the big breaking point for me, where I thought if I can't hold down a job, there is no place for me left on this planet. And in absolute tears, that was where I was like, look, I can't live like this anymore. What kind of life is this? Like, this is not a life. What am I even doing here? They weren't suicidal thoughts, as in like I need to go and commit self-harm right now. It's just like I just wish a spaceship would come and just transport me away from this. And I have no doubt
Mm.
that if this situation didn't happen, that would have definitely led to a lot of those really, a lot darker thoughts. And my mum looked me in the eye and she tapped me on the head and the heart and said, you have everything you need to succeed right here and right here. And then she printed out these documents on what anxiety was. And she showed me things on breathing. And then I started printing out a couple of quotes that I put on my bedroom wall. Things like, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. Other quotes like, life is not about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. They were the things that led me to go and make that massive shift. And since then, everything changed. I developed a low tolerance for wanting to be out late at night and sit around nightclubs where you can't hear people talk and everyone's
Mhm.
just drinking. Although I did that, not as much, but
And in Australia, you could do it 18 and up, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And then even, you and I, our mutual friend, Dr. Daniel Amen, an amazing guy, I interviewed him and he spoke about the role of alcohol. And I have noticed even since then that I don't even really have it, like my taste, not that I was ever a big drinker, my desire and taste for alcohol has waned. It's almost completely eliminated. It wasn't such a cataclysmic event like I mentioned earlier. That one was like I just woke up one morning and just went, cool, there's no place for this in my life anymore. I have a very big mission that I'm on, and I am very clear on my career purpose and my family purpose. If I have alcohol, even a little bit, I'm not going to sleep as well and I'm going to wake up
Mhm.
irritable. If I'm irritable, it means I have a bad relationship with my wife and my kids, and they deserve better. And I want to be a better husband and father. And it means that I won't be able to apply myself in my work. And I want to help everyone on the planet to activate their winning life so they can win the day, to help others do
Mhm.
the same. So there is no place for alcohol in that equation. So there's some of
Mhm.
the sort of transitions that I've gone through.
Yeah, so you were very clear on your why behind why you got rid of alcohol in your life and there was no place for it. And unless you are clear, it can be a challenge, I'm sure, to completely give up. And it's a social stigma, we know, and it's the only drug that people ask you why you don't do, right?
For sure. Yeah. And what's funny is that if you're going to meet someone for like A beer, you can end up going and getting an Uber, and if you're catching an Uber, you end up having a few drinks, and then you eat crappy food, and it's expensive as well to go out somewhere and spend like $12 on a beer, or $20 on a cocktail. Like, you're paying to put this crap in your body and feel bad the next day. And you mentioned the why there, and the why is very important, but to me it was more around the who. Like, who am I? What is my role on this earth? Who do I need to be to make that a reality? So that's I'm very, very aware of who I am and what I need to do to maintain that high performance. And that is a recommitment to that every single day. And I think most people, they're sort of waiting for a line they cross. For me, it's a recommitment every single day. And that is, over the long run, how days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years, and that becomes your life.
So the why and the who is really important for you to sustain this lifelong habit change, because drinking for many of us is a habit. And yes, it could be an addiction too, but it is just one of those social things that we do to unwind. And especially with anxiety and ADHD, it numbs us. So
Mm,
in the moment, it might feel good, but then after it feels worse because it's a depressant. So it's going to
yeah.
make us more depressed. So I think that's really important on what you shared in knowing who you want to be and who you're doing this for,
Mm.
yourself, right? And your family, and why you're doing it.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they make a little bit of change in their life, they want to reward themselves with pleasure. And Viktor Frankl spoke about those who don't have a clear purpose in life distract themselves with pleasure. So I like to think about it as, once you've created some momentum, you reward yourself with more momentum or loftier goals. Of course, it's important to be present and stop and smell the roses, and recognize how far you've come. But you've got to not reward yourself with punishment or something that's going to cause your body pain, like crappy food or alcohol that's just going to knock you off course.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Like, you build momentum with more momentum and bigger actions. I talk about that in my upcoming book on ADHD, overwhelm and underwhelm. So,
Amazing.
yay,
Yeah.
I knew we were on the same page here. So, tell us now, you have obviously a lot of accomplishments. What would you say your daily success tips are so people with ADHD, anxiety can get on the path of winning the day and feeling successful?
My win the day routine is very, very simple. It's very disciplined, but it's pretty comprehensive at the same time. A lot of people find it unusual that, because I talk about winning the day, they find it weird when I let them know that there is not a single day in my entire life where I've woken up and gone, wow, I am so grateful for this gift of being alive. I hate waking up. All I want to do is close my eyes and
Roll
go back to
over.
sleep. Yeah, exactly. When your brain is working a million miles an hour constantly, you need a lot more sleep. So I always wake up tired. You throw two young kids in the mix, and you always feel exhausted, especially first thing in the morning. And so what I do is, once my feet hit the ground, that's when I acknowledge that the day is there to be won or lost, and I make the decision to win. But that's what I call the acknowledgement phase. Then I move on to the sacrifice phase, which is proving that I'm going to turn up for this day. That's doing something that you don't want to do. That, to me, is the cold shower. It's a 5-minute cold shower, no hot water at all. I step into the cold shower. I have "win the day" written on my on my bracelet here. And while I'm in there, I focus on my breathing, and I get centered for the day. And you feel amazing after the cold shower. And then the next step from there is I go outside, and this is something that I've had a conversation with my wife around how important this is. I go outside, I sit in the sunshine, and I do my morning journal, where I look at what happened a year ago, because I've been doing my journal now for more than 700 days, and it pops up as a recap from the year before. And I write down what was unique about the last 24 hours. And then I add in what 3 things I'm going to do today that are going to make today a win. Not 10 things, 3 things, simple things to do that are a mixture of business, family, and physical or mental health. And then I focus on, what am I going to feel gratitude for? Not think gratitude, but actually feel gratitude. And then I exhale with a smile. That's when I know I've done that correctly. And then I write down a lesson, if there's a lesson from the last 24 hours, which is not always the case, but sometimes there is, and it's interesting to capture that. That is it for me. The moment I have done that, I am full of energy for the rest of the day. Absolutely nothing can stop me. But for people who haven't taken the time to do that, give space to themselves. There have been times, a lot of trial and error. Our daily routines naturally evolve as we go through different phases of life. The moment I try and be the hero of the family without getting myself sorted first, that's the moment the whole machine breaks down. That's what happens if I try and make
Yes.
like a fancy breakfast before I've had the time to myself. It's a horrible outcome. So yeah, getting centered
Yes.
first of all. Yeah, that everything I just shared there is the most critical part of my day and is what enables me to be highly effective, even if I don't feel motivated that day.
The miracle morning really changed the way that I took a look at the day. And I also feel like if I don't have my morning routine to me, then the day starts with chaos and finishes with chaos. And I'm
Mm,
constantly in that heightened state of anxiety, and my central nervous system just is all over the place. And for individuals with ADHD, we don't need to do 10 million things in the morning to have a morning routine. Like James said, it could literally just be touching the feet on the ground and then taking a cold shower, that cold exposure, or drinking some water. It doesn't have to be 5, 10, 15 things for yourself in the morning. We can build up to it or not. But as long as what you do in the morning is for you, then you can focus on the rest of your family afterwards.
absolutely. And then one thing that people underestimate is the evening routine. And I won't go into what I
Hmm.
do for that, which is it's nowhere near as detailed as the morning. But the one thing I do every single night is before I go to sleep, there's a quote that says, never go to bed without a request to your subconscious. Never go to bed without a request to your subconscious, because that's the final thought that you have that your brain is going to focus on while you're asleep. Your brain is not as stimulated with all of these different things because your eyes are closed and your ears are shut down a little bit. You don't have that exposure. So your brain can get to work on making all these things a reality and processing all the things that have happened. So even planting a question in there or a problem that you would like a solution to, and just allow your brain to figure it out while you're asleep. It's unbelievably powerful. So every night before I go to bed, as I close my eyes, I go to bed with a request to my subconscious. Is there something that I want? Is there something that I want to dwell on? Or is there something that I need a solution to? It's made a huge difference.
Interesting. I have never heard of that. I've heard of, evening prayers or gratitude. I'm interested to learn more about that because you're making a request to yourself. In the ADHD brain, we can have that problem in overthinking and having a difficult time relaxing our brains. So now we're requesting our brains and our subconscious to do something while we're sleeping. So
Mhm.
what can you give me an example of one that you use or have used?
It can be even a positive affirmation, like if I'm speaking on stage the next day, which ties into things like mental rehearsal, which is, some pretty advanced stuff that you talk about with mental rehearsal. But it can even be like, look, I'm so happy and grateful for how well this speech is going to go tomorrow. I'm so excited to meet all these different people. Or another one could be, look,
Mm,
I'm hosting an event coming up. It's really important that I get some amazing people there. Let's figure it out. And even just writing down the problem on a piece of paper next to you can be a good thing
yes.
to do. But most people, if your alternative is looking through TikTok videos or reading, Lord forbid, news articles before you're going to bed, see the difference between that negative energy that you're exposing yourself to.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We're trying to connect with positive energy and the frequency of our future self that we can feel grateful for in the present. That's what we're doing. We're just going to be calm on that. And even an acknowledgement of gratitude for your family and your situation. I tried to get my 4-year-old daughter. Someone told me that they always ask their child what they did to win the day that day, and I love that. And I thought, wow, how have I not done that with my own children? My daughter just won't do it for whatever reason. She's just like she thinks it's a funny game that she just won't engage with.
Well, because you're her dad. That's why.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Have someone else tell her to do it and then she'll do it.
I'll get you in, Brooke, and you can take care of it. But
Fair enough.
but I did ask her recently. I said, "What do you want to say thank you to the universe for?" And that's now what we do. It's a routine before we go to bed. She says, "Thank you for something amazing that happened that day." So I'm trying to sort of educate her that when you're grateful for something, it's going to encourage and stimulate more positive and rewarding things to come back to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you are self-expressed, you have developed, and your self-development continues to grow. What would you tell someone who's listening in now, who's just at the beginning of that self-development journey?
Isolation kills. I think you've got to get around the smartest, happiest, most successful people you can possibly find. I mean, even if you've got to pay, like make an investment just to get in the right room, the right conversation in the right room at the right time can completely change your life. Like that is so critical. The people who are stuck alone in their thoughts. I have a client of mine who lives in a remote location. He's had a really hard time gaining traction, and he's someone who's a strong ADHD diagnosis. But when you're in isolation,
Hmm.
it's so easy for that momentum just to die. And a lot of people are trying to get from 0 to 100. When I think if you can get from 0 to 1 or even zero
That
to five,
1%.
yeah, that momentum is what makes it. So for me, prioritizing time to go and just surround myself with the most influential people. I'm not saying people are better or worse than other people, but the ones who are like-minded, who have the success in the lives that I want. An example of that is every September, it's the first thing that goes into my calendar. I go to, it's called the Wizard Academy just outside Austin, Texas, it's called the Pathfinder Mastermind. It's 3 days down there. It's phenomenal to be around those people. It gives me motivation.
Hmm.
There's a recency bias when we see people. It's why typically we engage more on social media posts, people that we have seen recently. That's why it's important to get out there. And the more people who know who you are and where you're going, then the more people who can help you achieve that mission.
Absolutely. The first thing in my book actually is to buddy up, because you can't do things in isolation. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. Especially working from home. That's why I have a team. So we can help more people, but also we can bounce ideas off of each other, because it can be so isolating. And with the pandemic that just happened, that's why there's so much more anxiety and depression in middle schoolers and up, because of that isolation. I know Dr. Amen was talking about that too.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the prescription sleeping pills have gone up considerably as well during COVID. But the cost of people who are stuck in their homes, for people who are perhaps military veterans or entrepreneurs at the end of their tether, or stay-at-home parents who have had a very tough time with sick kids. I mean, that isolation is what just destroys lives. And there's a real cost there in terms of domestic violence, substance abuse, suicide that has just not been part of the narrative, which has been really disappointing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. How did you get involved in the Think and Grow Rich, and what type of people would you recommend to read your books?
Good question. Good question. So, Think and Grow Rich is the book that changed my dad's life. It was released in 1937. It's the best selling self help book of all time. So, I was always aware of its power, but I grew up listening to Jim Rohn on those audio recordings. Jim Rohn, the classic American personal development icon. I still listen to his stuff today. And Jim's biggest influence was Napoleon Hill. And Napoleon Hill's biggest influence was Andrew Carnegie. So, it's interesting to see who like the root mentor is of a lot of these things. So, I got involved when I had a meeting with the producers. They were making a movie of Think and Grow Rich. And I said to them, I just basically said, here's what you should do. There's 13 principles of Think and Grow Rich. First of all, make sure you release a book alongside the movie, because that's what everyone does. Movies don't become movies unless there's a book about it beforehand. People don't naturally identify as much with names like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, the very male dominated old school characters who, of course, were very successful. But what about some people today that we can learn from and connect with a little bit more? So they just said, we love the idea. Can you do it? And I said, yeah, I'll knock it out of the park for
All
you.
right,
And that
twist
was,
my arm.
yeah, exactly. And that's when I came on board as executive producer of the film Think and Grow Rich the Legacy, author of the book Think and Grow Rich the Legacy. I interviewed people like Rob Dyrdek, Barbara Corcoran, Bob Proctor, so many other amazing people. Then Don Green, who's the head of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, called me one day and he said, we have an unreleased Napoleon Hill manuscript. Would you like to be involved in editing this and annotating this? And so I think I added about 10 or 15,000 words to this manuscript. I brought in Sharon Lecter to help contribute as well. Sharon Lecter wrote Think and Grow Rich for
Sharon's
Women.
great. I actually
She's
have,
fantastic.
I have her book, Exit Rich.
Yeah, nice. A new one. Yeah, yeah. And she also wrote all the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books with Robert Kiyosaki. Yeah.
Yep,
She is
yep. I
she
met
is
her.
phenomenal. Yeah, she's great. Oh, look at that. Signed copy and everything. I love it.
You know what I love about her is the question that she asks, why not?
Mm.
It's just simple, perfect, to the point when you're trying to make a decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I saw Sharon, we've spoken on stage at a bunch of different events together. She had reached a point in her career where she wanted to retire, and then she changed her mindset around that to refire instead of retire. And I thought that was such a cool thing, because sometimes we get a little bit down on ourselves and think that, cool, maybe it's someone else's time. But hey, it's so awesome to see Sharon just keep stepping it up.
I like that refire because, neurons that fire together or that
Yep.
wire together, fire
Wire together,
together,
fire
right?
together. Yeah.
So that's kind of a play on to that. So that's cool. So with that being said, what type of people should read that book?
Anyone who feels like they have a sense that there's more to them for life. A lot of people reach this point where they feel like, is this it? Or how did I get here? Or they just feel like there's more contribution. I've sat down and worked with people who are unbelievably successful in one area. Maybe they're very strong physically or have got a lot of money in the bank and have had very successful businesses. But inevitably, the people who feel like they're treading water in life, it's because they're not clear on who they are and where they want to go. So for anyone who feels like they're treading water and they want to get a bit more clarity on who they are and where they want to go, then to go and see stories in Think and Grow Rich: The Legacy and Andrew Carnegie's Mental Dynamite will give them a big boost.
That's so cool. All right. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, James, where can they reach you?
Just look up James Whittaker or Win the Day. I'm hanging out on Instagram a bit. TikTok as well is a good platform. So come and find me and say hi.
But you're not scrolling or doom scrolling before you go to sleep. Let's just be clear.
For sure. So I set a goal for myself. What was it, about a year ago? I said, I want to get 10 million views on TikTok. And I didn't have any views on TikTok at that point. And it was just a simple mindset shift. So of course I needed to post consistently, but I also needed to stop consuming. So I changed my mind of, instead of consuming on TikTok, I was only going to create. So I don't allow myself to consume, which is not that much, unless I've created first. And now we're, I think, 24 million views on TikTok in the space of 12 months. So that little formula has worked out really, really well.
I probably need to hire you for TikTok. And then maybe you can hire me for Instagram. I don't know. We could figure that out, but that's amazing. I love you set your intention, you know your why, you know your how, and your who. So that's great. All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Successful with ADHD. And I look forward to spreading the message even more on Instagram.
Thanks so much for having me, Brooke.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helps you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.